was the first leading director that I ever worked with, so it was a very intimidating experience to begin with, but he was enchanting. He was not a very good communicator because he had a funny impediment. He kind of sniffed, grunted, sniffed, but he drew things. I think he'd been a graphic artist before he became a director, and so he was able to illustrate what he said, what he wanted, and it was really my first lesson in writing screenplays, and he was a wonderful teacher. What he taught me was economy. I can give you an example. The opening of the book, A High Wind in Jamaica, is a description of the high wind coming in, and I copied it more or less entirely from the book, about 2 pages. And he looked at it and he said, "What's this?" And I said, "That's the wind rising in Jamaica before the children have to be sent away." He said, "Just put a wind rises, I'll do the rest." And that was my first lesson. You don't have to over-describe in a screenplay, and he was terrific at doing that. And also at visual effects. I remember the first entrance of Anthony Quinn is over the rail of the ship. He comes up and you see his head just emerge above the rail. And McKendrick drew that for me in a series of storyboard drawings. And all I had to do was describe it, but had to describe it economically. That was what he was really good at. And of course he was good on character and various things. I mean, he'd criticize dialogue if he didn't think it was absolutely right and so on. But the most important thing he taught me was how to structure a film. He taught me a technique which is now very common, but I didn't know it then. When he wanted to work out a sequence, he put them, or got me to put them, on postcards. So you'd put, for example, exterior, the ship sailing. Then you make another postcard, exterior, the deck, the children are playing. Next postcard, exterior, the crow's nest. I'm making it up, but I mean that sort of thing. So you saw the whole sequence and we'd lay it out on the floor. He told me that in Hollywood in the early days they used to put them on boards, and you'd see writers and directors walking from one building to the other carrying these boards covered in a cloth so that nobody could see what they were up to. And I've used that ever since. And now, of course, it's on computer programs for screenplays. You have a sort of postcard system, and it's a wonderful way of just seeing how the sequence runs. Well, everything I've since written, he has somehow influenced. And I was very pleased when I was nominated for an Oscar for The Dresser in, oh God, I don't know how many years ago, a long time ago. He was still alive and he was teaching in California, and I was able to phone him and thank him, because I think he has informed my work in a very basic way from the very start of my screenwriting career. So I'm extremely grateful to him. And I think everything I write for the movies somehow starts with McKendrick's notion of planning these sequences, which I do. And I do it to this day. He had a good sense of story as a director, which is very, very important for the director to have. I think his weaknesses, as far as I can describe them, were with people. I'm not sure he was very good with actors, and that's a drawback. Because of this difficulty in communicating, he wasn't timid. He wasn't at all timid. I'm not wanting to give the impression that he was in somehow reticent. He wasn't. Just a difficulty in communicating, and I think that was a problem when he directed. But in sessions with me, at any rate, he was a terrific guide and encourager and critic. Oh, he was first class. There was something of the outside about him in his personality. He didn't entirely fit into the scene. This was the early 60s, and it was all swinging London and all that, which I didn't fit into much either. But I did have an impression of him as an outsider, as someone isolated from the main thrust of the film industry. Film scholars, teachers, and things try to make a pattern in one's films, but you know, it's a difficult profession. You do films that come your way. Unless you're one of these European film directors who just make their own films. Sandy didn't do that. He made films that came his way. Absolutely, there's no question about it. There was a dark side to his character. Um, not that he revealed it openly, but you could sense there was something that he was a troubled man. I think there was something troubled about him, and I'm sure that's reflected in the movies and the way he shot them. Of course, Mandy is a good example of that. It's shot a sort of it's very dark. The film is dark in the way it's shot and the way the story is told. Oh yes, I think you could say that about him. I'm sure it's true of all good comedies. It's got to be a subject that's unbearable. And what you do is you make it bearable, but still unbearable. I know it sounds as if I'm talking absolute nonsense, but I know exactly what he means. And The Lady Killer is a very, very dark story, black story. But he had that's how his eye worked. He had that outsider's look at it and just flipped it. Oh no, because you can see it's not dated. Because when they tried to do the remake, that was dated. His film is a masterpiece. The acting is quite wonderful. The way the story is told, the little old lady is absolutely superbly played and directed. Oh no, I think it's a marvelous film. It stood up very, very well.